Chapter 10, Tallulah, Louisiana. The sun rose the next day, and the birds were chirping. The smell of honeydew filled the air. The sun pierced through the trees and awoke Wanyenyekevu. He just laid there, enjoying the sound and sweet smell, staring into the sky and thinking about the past few days and how blessed he felt to be chosen by Sabbath. Now heading south, back on Highway 65, slowly taking his time admiring the scenery. Up ahead, he saw an old abandoned structure that appeared to have been a church at some time. As he approached the structure, the building and his surroundings became brighter, and bright clouds surrounded him. There was an old rusty sign on the building that read, New Zion C. But as he came closer, everything began to change. The grass turned green, the building transformed with a fresh coat of white paint, and the sign read, Crusade for Christ, 1183 Joseph Street. Wanyenyekevu opened the doors, and service went on. People praised, sang, and worshipped Sabbath. Wanyenyekevu was overjoyed. Sliding into one of the open spaces to join in, he found himself clapping and giving praise to Sabbath. After an hour, two women approached the pulpit. You could tell they were mother and daughter. The daughter spoke. For centuries now, they have used and abused Sabbath's people. Because of greed, many individuals continued to do so after abolishing the international slave trade. They stole our ideas and inventions for profit, imitated but never duplicated. They used our very own skin to create shoes, clothes, and even purses. They lynched, whipped, and murdered us, gave us empty promises, destroyed Black Wall Street and New York Central Park, treated us like animals and commodities, black gold, as you will. They used laws called black or slave codes, using deceptive means to create self-hatred and mentally destroyed the idea of marriage among us. The one great sin they have instilled in many minds is the corrupted and perverted ideas of sex. Are we beyond repair? God forbids. Centuries ago, slave sex farms were created, like any other farms. They wanted the biggest and the strongest. They forced orgies, as they pervertedly watched, men having sex with their daughters, mothers having sex with their sons. This is where the MF word came from. They raped our men, women, and children and perverted our family values, but Sabbath is able. Marriage, in the eyes of Sabbath, is honorable when two virgins consummate their marriage. The blood from two virgins joining together for the first time makes that marriage holy. They have turned the natural into perversion, and perversion is now called natural. They are not ignorant. They know and knew that most people in the Torah are people of color. They know and knew that people of color, the more specifically, help them become who they are today. They are as little children demanding to be seen, but their actions have done great damage and have caused the world to become as it is. It amazed Wanyenyekevu at how the two women spoke with power and authority as he took a seat and continued to listen and agree with the women. They have taken the word love and replaced it with lust. Through mind games and manipulation, many of our people have gradually become selfish, disingenuous, and rather lay on their back for physical pleasures than walk on their feet doing honest work. PTSD is embedded in our minds, and we have become animals instead of humans, and that was how they treated us. What we need to understand about racism and the white power dynamic so well understood by black scholars like Neely Fuller, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, myself and others, is that it is not just the organs of its body, but it is the skeletal structure. You are still left with the framework when you remove the brick and mortar and all the internals. It is as my son Jamiron once argued so beautifully with his white college sociology professor. Standards. Even when you whites are not operating on prejudice, you are, by its very nature, and based on its implied, if not obvious imperative, operating on the standard of racism they teach you from birth. And that standard he mentioned is driven by a power dynamic established on white genetic survival. Until we get that and the fact that we, no matter where we are in the world, are seen and are a global black nation, whether or not we embrace it and are treated as such, and begin to think in terms of our common survival as does every other ethnic group that are evolving out of us, we will continue to be denied full equality and real freedom. A rock thrown in the pond will have a ripple effect that will eventually disturb the entire body of water. It was Mordecai who warned Esther in the Torah. Art thou not a Jew? Meaning, what happens to your people will also happen to you. We may have gained freedom from slavery. However, freedom did not mean free from. The chains were gone, but the system they represented remained solidly in place. Take the drugs from the addict, his addiction remains. Until the mental dependency is broken, he is not free. The Native Americans understood this, which is why they demanded to be separate, equal, and sovereign citizens of their own country. Realizing that it was not about segregation but independence. One Inyekovu got so excited that he stood up and shouted, "Preach!" As she continued. They insisted on defining their status. They were hostages in their own land. So were we. It is not intelligent to ask your captor to dictate the terms of your acquired freedom. And it is not freedom if you have no choice. Many began to jump for joy as she spoke. Music rang out in the building, but there was no band in the building. The mother stood up and started praising the Lord as well. She let out a large cry, saying, "Glory!" and the entire building shook from its foundation. One Inyekovu felt joy and peace and had to stand up. He closed his eyes and started praising Sabaoth. When he opened his eyes, he stood in an empty, abandoned building, but the feeling was still there. One Inyekovu said as he shook his head, "Just like fire, just like fire." Walking away from the building, he said, "Who was she?" and heard a voice. "I'm Prophetess Achilamelech." Looking around, he just smiled. "Thanks, Achilamelech, I had a great time, and I needed that." 50 feet from the building, she stood there with her mother on Highway 65 with a beautiful and peaceful smile. "You're welcome, and this is my mother, Pastor Jones." Pastor Jones smiled. "Gradualism is how the evil one will try to destroy Sabaoth's people." She pointed toward Highway 65, and they all walked down the road as Pastor Jones continued. "By slowly indoctrinating a plan into action until it becomes normal, bestiality, necrophilia, and even homosexuality. During the early 1970s, homosexuality was a mental disease. Now, it is a way of life. It gradually became accepted by the 1990s. By 2000, it was a way of life. Thousands of years later, this world is just as, or even worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. Achilamelech turned toward One Inyekovu. Remember this: man is the sixth extinction facing this planet. His greed and disrespect for nature and life is hurtling him towards the extinction of over 1 million species in the next decade or less. Nshika said, "Except those days be shortened, no flesh will be saved." And so it is. They continued talking until they were between Fleury Road and Omega Road on Highway 65. Achilamelech stopped and took out some olive oil. She and her mother prayed over the oil, and her mother poured it into her hands. Achilamelech said, "You are about to meet incubus and succubus. You will need strength to defeat your enemy. You must know your enemy to defeat your enemy. Only through Sabaoth is this possible." She placed her hand on his head and prayed for him. He lifted his hands in the air and started praising Sabaoth. When he came down, they had disappeared. One Inyekovu felt like he was on cloud 9 as he continued to walk toward Tallulah. He passed the old abandoned town of Tallulah and closed in on the bend before he finally got to Tallulah. One Inyekovu felt at peace since his talk with Achilamelech and her mother, all the while enjoying the scenery when he came across a sign that read, "Welcome to Tallulah." As he walked, he noticed the grass became greener as he approached the city, and the street signs were repairing themselves, and he started reading them on his way. Highway 65 changed into North Cedar Street. Passing Blair Street, McKinley Street, Roosevelt Street, then he came to a strange crossing. One side of the street, on the right, was called South Levy Street, but directly across from it, the name was Van Zelfen Street. He stopped and asked himself, why is this named South Levy Street on this side of the road, but this street is named Van Zelfen, unlike the rest? Maybe this guy, Van Zelfen, did something important? he continued as he passed North Street East, Washington Street, and East Auburn Street. He asked himself, "What kind of name is this?" as he continued to pass East Darrow Street, East Craig Street. As he looked ahead and saw Yael and Letzi, above their heads was a sign that read, East Green Street / Highway 80. Letzi said as he approached, "This will be your time of reflection. This will be your home for the next 90 days, and you will not see us again until it's time to move on. You will experience joy, hatred, fear, love, and anger in this place, but you will learn what is needed to help you finish your task at hand for Sabbath while you are here, and this will only happen here. You will see echoes of time, and echoes in time. It is one thing to hear of the stories and events that happened to your family, but it is another thing to see them." Wanyanyekevu started to speak, but Letzi interrupted him. "If you stand in a location for a long time, you will see moments in the past, dealing with or concerning your family. These are called echoes of time. However, if you speak the words, 'Show me,' the same time will fast forward to the future until you say, 'Stop.' These are called echoes in time." Wanyanyekevu smiled, trying to recap what was said. Echoes of time shows the past. But echoes in time shows the future. Of time and in time. Understood. Standing in a location for a while, echoes of time in history. If I say, "Show me," echoes of time, fast forward to a later period. Wanyanyekevu said, "Hold on, wait. What?" Letzi continued. "In any case, echoes of time or echoes in time, you can say stop, rewind, fast forward, or even repeat, and the echoes will do so. No one is able to see you, because these are just images of the past." Wanyanyekevu nodded his head. "Understood, I think." Yael looked at Wanyanyekevu. "Before you leave, the evil one will show himself. Be strong, for you are now ready. There should not be a doubt in your mind when he appears before you. Remember, you cannot kill these deities as of yet, so don't try, but if you're not careful, they can bring the worst part of you out." Letzi, pointing to the west. "There will be a meal waiting for you on Adam Street. This will be the last meal we will prepare for you. The flesh is feeble, and this is the reason for your hunger. You have been through a lot, and it is about to be over, and everything will return to normal." Letzi and Yael bid their farewells and disappeared. Wanyanyekevu stopped as his stomach was growling. "Where's Adam Street? I didn't see that behind me?" "Go west." He heard Letzi's voice in the distance. Wanyanyekevu started walking, and he stood in front of South Chestnut Street. Just for a moment, the woods in front of him changed. Structures appeared before him. "Cross Keys Bank," he said to himself. "A bank." He continued to walk, and a particular structure would appear and disappear. "Cooties? Tallulah Motor Supply?" Trying to remember the street names and some landmarks. Besides, he would spend the next 90 days here. He needed to know how to get around, but he was uncertain what was the present and what was an echo of time. Confused by the time, he came close to some old railroad tracks and stopped. "Let's see how this works." "Show me." He started toying with the echoes to see which was which. Looking at a building, he read, "Blooms," he said aloud. "Stop!" It was an ice cream parlor. "Fast forward!" It was an inside strip mall. "Fast forward!" There was a sign that said, "George Wall Grocery." He repeated, "Rewind, rewind, rewind." Muddied water had surrounded him, and it was coming fast. "Quickly," he said. "Fast forward." After a few seconds, he shouted, "Stop!" An old newspaper was stuck to the bottom of his shoes. Picking it up, it read the flood of 1920. Looking up at the same building, he read a sign that said, "Bloom's Apartments." He stood there for 30 minutes, playing with the echoes until he could understand them. Crossing the railroad tracks, he was happy to see the street sign, Adams Street. His mouth watered as he smelled the aroma, seeing the campsite just up ahead. He shouted for joy as he ran and opened the pot. Chicken and dumplings, lightly mixed with green beans and carrots. Man, oh man! He said out loud. Sitting there eating, he spotted two young boys, about 9 or 10. A structure appeared made out of some kind of material he had never seen before with a metal roof. There were signs around it, and a large red ball was on its side with cursive lettering with the words, Coca-Cola. Wanyanyekova got up and walked to the building. Mr. Pete's Grocery. A sign posted outside the building. Curious, he tried to open the door, and his hands went through the door, so he continued to walk inside. There were the two boys with a red wagon filled with glass bottles with Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, and RC written on them. An elderly man said to the boys, "That'll be $20. One of the boys said, "And that's $10 apiece." Andrew replied, "Yeah," with a smile on his face. "Ah, man. Larry," Andrew said, "let's go to George Wall's and buy some firecrackers." Larry counted his money and excitedly said, "Okay." Wanyanyekova, with a smile on his face, laughed at the two boys enjoying themselves as they ran up the street. He followed them until he got back to his campsite. From a distance, he heard them comparing and trading their snacks. "I'll give you 1 sugar baby and 2 planks for a moon pie," said Andrew. "Okay," said Larry. "I'll give 3 windmill cookies and 2 Kool-Aid straws for a Babe Ruth." The two boys faded down the road. Wanyanyekova had just finished his meal and packed up his backpack when he saw the boys returning more excited than before. Wanyanyekova said to himself as he took out his notepad to take notes on how to get around this small town, "I'll follow them for a while." The two boys headed north on Adams Street and turned west on West Craig Street, where they stopped on the corner of West Craig Street and Harding Street. They walked onto a porch and started separating their firecrackers. "What y'all doing making all that noise on my Gary?" Andrew shouted back. "It's me and Larry, Big Ma." Big Ma came to the door. "Y'all gotta take that noise somewheres else. Y'all gonna make my cake drop. This house shakes when y'all shake. Y'all gone somewheres else with that noise and shaking." As she went into the house, you could hear her say, "If these cakes done dropped, I'm gonna whoop both y'all tails." The boys shouted, "Okay," as they quickly gathered up their things, headed north on Harding, and made a quick left on West Arrow. "Ruby!" shouted Larry. "Me and Andy." Ruby interrupted him. "You and Andra go and get me some pressed ham and cheese, some light bread, and some of those Ritz crackers from Yellowhammer," Andrew said. "Where we gonna put our stuff at? We don't want Dexter messing with our firecrackers until we come back," Ruby said. "Y'all put that shit on the table. Till y'all get back, Dexter ain't gonna mess with that shit. Gone now and her back. Oh, and grab me a can of snuff and a box of starch in the red box. Andra, make sure y'all get that red box. Tell Bowman to put it on my tab till next week. Oh, go ahead and get $1 worth of hog head cheese for Nut." The boys put their bags on the kitchen table and ran out the door. Wanyanyekova left his belongings at the house and chased after the boys. He felt the excitement as they did. Taking notes as they headed west into a curve and made a right on Pecan Street, then left on Bozeman Street until they came to a white building on West Craig Street. As they returned, they saw Rosemary at the house with Ruby. "Andrew, you and Larry James need to hurry up with that pressed ham. Me and Chuck are hungrier than 2 fat ladies waiting on their food stamps at the end of the month." Larry laughed and said, "Hey, Rory." Wanyanyekova was laughing unto tears as he hung around them as he spoke. Fast forward. He was so entertained with them that he stayed around for 3 weeks, fast forwarding and rewinding their time echoes. He wrote the names of the people: Ruby, LZ, Blue, Dexter, Pam, Dee, Susie, Odell, and so many more. They had surnames like Reynolds, Bolin, Roach, Moore, Turner, and Atkins. One day, as he was studying his scroll, he jumped up, and to his surprise he had been surrounded by his descendants all this time and didn't even know it. On that same day, a woman came to Ruby's house. She looked familiar, and he stopped what he was doing to listen in. "Ruby!" the woman shouted as she knocked on the door. Ruby opened the door. "Hey, Cat, what you yelling and screaming about?" Cat said. Take me to the bait shop. I just ran into a little chunk of change. I'll buy you your Miller High Life, and I want me some 15-year-old old charter. Ruby smiled. Well, shit, hold on, girl. Let me go put on some shoes. The women entertained Wanyenyekevu as he looked on and laughed as they began to drink and listen to music. He was curious about these two and wondered who this new woman was, so he followed her home. After a few echoes, he realized she was his great-great-aunt, Catherine Roach, who lived nearby on the corner of University and North Madison Street. He played with the time echoes for a bit longer until he was on University and Weiss Street. There, on the corner, stood a greenhouse with an enormous yard. Nervous for the first time, he realized this was his great-grandmother's house through which he was the descendant of Adam, the first man on earth. Catherine Bolin, Eagle Child, or Behitha's great-granddaughter. Wanyenyekevu stood there. Oh, I see now, Catherine with AC was named after her mother, Catherine with AK. Then he said rewind. Suddenly, a young man was out the house's back door holding a lady's eyes closed with both hands. Don't look now, Mama, the young man said as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Now open 'em, as he walked in front of her. What is it? She said. He placed his foot on a pedal. Now you don't have to walk around the yard to hang the clothes on the line. You just put the clothes on the line, as he illustrated, and press this pedal until you come across more space to hang some more clothes. She looked at it for a moment. What if it's raining, Willie? You trying to electrocute me? The young man laughed. Nah, Mama. I didn't think of that. Wanyenyekevu felt someone grab his crotch. He grabbed the hand while simultaneously turning around and saw a beautiful woman with seductive eyes smiling. Hey, handsome, the woman said as she grabbed one of her breasts and licked it. You like? Wanyenyekevu took a step back as he noticed this woman was naked and stood 6 foot tall. Her vagina was vast and bushy, and from her ankles downward was the body of a snake that stretched about 10 feet long. In the middle of the tail, it changed colors, and at the other end, there was a man who was the same height, and they both hovered 3 inches off the ground. She slithered towards her other half, and the man said, No, succubus, I think he prefers this. He grabbed his penis and rubbed the head of his penis. This creature was handsome with a muscular build and whose penis was long enough to touch his knees and about 7 inches thick in girth. He continued to speak. This young man needs something that can make his toes curl up. Wanyenyekevu took out his samurai but remembered what Yael had said and put it away. Wanyenyekevu said to them, What is this? The woman said, I'm succubus, and this is my twin brother, incubus. You can have one of us. And incubus, with his baritone voice, interrupted. Or both of us. Wanyenyekevu said, I have a wife-to-be. No, thank you. Succubus laid down on the grass while rubbing her clitoris, she said. Crawl on in here and come take this for a test spin. I'm sure you'll like it. Wanyenyekevu himself began getting an erection and said with authority, No thanks, I'll wait for my wife. I prefer love over lust. Incubus said, Wife? I can't tell. I see you got yourself a hard-on. He headed toward Wanyenyekevu and wrapped around him. That husband and wife shit is going to be a thing of the past, thanks to us. We are making hoes and extra hoes only. There will be no such thing as a housewife. He laughed. Just hoes. He continued. For your people, yes, your people, here on this side of the globe, we had to put special plans in place for you all. You see, we started with slavery, and we put it in the minds of your slave masters to make your penis and vagina larger and bigger, even larger titties through breed techniques we gave them, and they started having orgies, and that alone introduced porn. We seduced them to seduce and rape your people as the years passed. Wanyenyekevu said to himself. Gradualism. Incubus continued as he was rubbing on succubus's breast. Are you sure you don't want just a little of this? Wanyenyekevu said. What is it that you want from me? I have no intention of doing anything with the demon. Succubus became angry. You won't, but your people will, Even now, they have us as their spirit husbands and wives. They cannot and will not be faithful to anyone but us. Sure, they will have sex, and they can have sex. We don't give a damn, the more, the merrier, but marriage, no, they belong to us. Incubus interrupted. Many will only be able to get along with each other only during sex and sex only. They will incur cervical cancer, HIV/AIDS, and other incurable diseases. These will spread among them, and even new diseases will only be created and spread among your people. They both said as if they were singing a song. Just a whole lot of fucking going on. Succubus laughed. We will do this while they sleep. Everyone got to sleep. We will cause people to rape your children at an early age, and your children will run to the same sex for comfort. And your men, we will feminize them, and your women shall be masculine to the point that they will not populate anymore, but they will be highly indulged in sexual activities with each other. Hoes, just hoes, more hoes everywhere. Incubus and Succubus laughed at Wanyanyekevu and began having sex with each other as he stood there. Wanyanyekevu became immensely angered by the statements and actions of the two, and he called on Nshika. Nshika, son of Sabaoth, I am but a man and have no power against such a creature. I call on your name and your power. Wanyanyekevu pointed to the demons. In the name of my Redeemer and Savior, in the name of Nshika, I rebuke you. The two had quickly disappeared, and Wanyanyekevu cried.